Year after year, the Buffalo Sabres are picked as the breakout candidate for that season. And year after year, the NHL's longest playoff streak continues to get longer. Is this the year they finally break through? This is the 2025-26 deep dive on the Buffalo Sabres. Hello and welcome to episode number 3, team number 30 in my deep dive series, the Buffalo Sabres. And this is a fun one. We have some great guests at the end of this video. First of all, though, thank you so much for all the engagement, all the love on the videos so far. Both Chicago and San Jose videos have done fantastic so far compared to where the channel usually is. We hit over 200 subscribers, so thank you so much for that. And stick around for the rest of the series because every video is going to be fairly similar. We have guests lined up for most of them. Some teams I'll probably just end up having to do myself, but for the most part I'm trying to have guests for all of them, and that's no different for today's video, so stick around till the end to see that. But the Buffalo Sabres, man, this has been a team, like I said in the intro, that so many people have picked to be, the breakout candidate this year and the team that's finally going to break through, and it never seems to happen. And it was a pretty quiet offseason for the Sabres, so they're really hoping on some development here to get them to the next level. Looking at the Sabres' grades, there's definitely some areas on this team that I really like, and primarily that's the defense. I think their blue line is actually pretty solid. It's one of the best blue lines the Sabres have had probably in over a decade. And the offense really has potential here too. There's a lot of good young players who are going to get a lot of opportunity on this team. And even with the loss of J.J. Peterka, there's still a lot of excitement about what the Sabres can bring. They're ranked 24th in offense, 18th in defense, 30th in goaltending, 20th in special teams, and 32nd in coaching culture. I think those are pretty well self-explanatory. The power play wasn't great last year. The penalty kill was pretty bad. Offensively, this team is really young. They were actually really good in terms of goal scoring. Their expected numbers, though, didn't really match that, so there might be some regression there. But defensively, I mean, this team is actually pretty solid. I think they're pretty well in the middle group of the NHL, kind of in that middle third of the league. And goaltending is just unproven, right? Like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is a huge question mark, and Alex Lyon is more of a stopgap, and we'll see if Devin Levi can finally break into the roster. But there's a lot of question marks about that. And the Sabres, in terms of like the next group of teams, the Sabres just kind of have the most question marks for me. There's a lot more that has to go right in Buffalo than the next couple teams we're going to talk about, which is why they're 30th, although this next kind of grouping of teams is all fairly close in my mind, but there's a lot more stability on those teams, which is why they rank slightly higher. I wouldn't be surprised if the Sabres, similar to Chicago and San Jose, aren't actually in the bottom 3 by the end of the season. Jumping into coaching culture, though, it's pretty easy that Kevin Adams is a D, which is my lowest grade for GMs. C-, by the way, is my lowest grade for head coaches. I got questions about that. It's just the way it kind of worked out when I was putting them into groups. I didn't have enough to split up more groups. So that's just kind of how that worked out. Lindy Ruff is just kind of past his prime at this point. He hasn't shown me anything that gets me excited about his systems, the way that his teams are playing. It seems like the game's kind of just passed them by in terms of play style. I haven't seen crazy development leaps from any of their young kids. Zach Benson has looked good in spurts, but aside from that, there really hasn't been. Owen Power's been fine, but he still looks like a second pair defenseman at this point. There really hasn't been a lot of development on that side. There's nothing you can really hang your hat on here for Lindy Ruff as a a flag post in the ground, pointing to him being a great head coach. And C- is kind of where I have to put him. And obviously Kevin Adams are in contention for worst GM in the NHL. So I don't think there's going to be much pushback on that. And obviously this team's a rebuilder. So it's pretty clear that this is 32 in coaching culture, and I don't think I'm going to get a ton of pushback on that. It seems like things are pretty bleak in terms of where this team sits from a managerial perspective. And unfortunately for this team, that's leading to a lot of players not wanting to play here. So it all kind of adds up, and if your managerial side isn't great, it's going to hurt the development, right? You can develop players as good as you want, but if they're not going to stay, it really doesn't do much for you. And Kevin Adams, as I believe we talk about in the conversation we're going to have at the end of the video, really hasn't gone out and gotten the best player in a trade. It's very much him moving out good assets to bring in other puzzle pieces to fill, depth roles, and that's not going to help this team improve overall, right? He's filling in the margins rather than actually writing the paper. We look at the numbers here for Buffalo, and the good news for them is they actually had a pretty good scoring rate last year. They were third in terms of goals for. The other thing, though, is that they were fifth in finishing, right? This is a team that really didn't generate a lot of expected goals. 21st in that category, according to Jay Fresh's model. Evolving Hockey didn't like him either. And defensively, this team was pretty porous, right? Like, they really didn't do a whole lot there. 26th in goals against. The penalty kill was pretty bad. The power play wasn't very good. There really wasn't a whole lot to hang your hat on other than the goal scoring. And, one of their highest goal scorers just left the team. So when you're this low in the standings already, it's really hard for me to grab onto insane development unless you have a blue chip prospect stepping into the team, or B, you went out and made significant adds, and for Buffalo, they took their biggest asset last year, which was their goal scoring, and they made it worse. So it's hard for me to be optimistic about that. In terms of that, obviously they can get development from a bunch of guys. We're going to talk about some of their young players here in a second, but in terms of like what they have on the roster, right, like losing Peterka and not replacing him with anything, it's tough, right? It's not going to make things easy for this team. And we jump into the offense right now, and obviously the big player on this team is Tage Thompson, right? Tage Thompson is the big player on this group, and he's the best forward by a pretty substantial margin on this team. Alex Tuch, I don't think gets enough credit for being a pretty good role player. Now I think he should be more ideally the best player on a second line rather than your second best forward. But there's potential here to see some growth, right? I mean, Josh Norris has question marks about health, but if he can stay healthy, maybe he could be a number one line center. Like, we've never seen it, but maybe, right? Like, Ryan McLeod had a really strong season last year, and I expect that development to continue as he gets a bigger role. Yuri Kulich is another guy who's going to get a shot, and Peyton Krebs. I mean, if Peyton Krebs can finally figure it out, that'll be good for this team too. And I mean, Zach Benson is the guy I'm most excited about because his defensive numbers are already like really, really good. And for a young player, that's usually the part of the game that lags behind. So hopefully he can, get more consistent offensively, and then the rest of that will come. And I mean, other than that, though, like, Jack Quinn is there, who I'm fine with. I actually like Josh Doan. Now, I don't think they won the trade in any means, but I do like both players they've got. We'll talk about Kesselring and Josh Doan in a bit more detail later, but I do like both players, and I think they're both going to vastly improve what this team can do defensively, which could even out the scoring that they're losing, right? Like, if you take out 40 points in goals, but you don't allow 40 points on the other end, it kind of evens out, right? Now, fans aren't going to love that because goal scoring is more sustainable than defensive play is in a lot of cases, but and obviously goal scoring wins you games. But in a way, they could mitigate some of that loss in terms of scoring due to the higher level defensive players that they brought in. The big thing I want to point out here, though, is the even strength scoring on this team, right? You have Tage Thompson, who obviously led the league. This is even strength, by the way, if you're watching the video, but I'll read the numbers out too anyway. Tage Thompson, 34 goals, 48 points. In terms of 5-on-5 numbers, the assists definitely not there. 14 assists really isn't a ton for the guy who's supposed to be your number one forward, but I mean he's getting the 34 goals, which is very good for 5-on-5 numbers. Alex Tuch, who's still on this team, obviously 24 goals, 43 points, and then after that, the next highest goal total is Yuri Kulich at 15, and obviously JJ Peterka was there, right? 19 goals, 45 points. You really don't have that, right? Like, Ryan McLeod had 12 and 38. Jason Zucker had 9 goals and 29. You don't expect a big jump from him. Jack Quinn had 11 and 24 points. Peyton Krebs had 7 and 24. So there's not a lot there. And even Zach Benson, we talked about earlier, 6 goals and 23 points, 5-on-5, right? Like, you lose Peterka, and you really need somebody to step up, right? Because the two guys behind him, right? Like behind Paterka is Alex Tuck, who is getting older, and I don't expect to be much better than 24 goals and 43 points this year, if that. Ryan McLeod, who you'd expect to take a bit of a jump, but from 12 points, maybe he gets to 15, 16, 30.8 points, maybe turns into 40, 45. Jason Zucker, I don't expect to be any better than 10 goals and 29, 30 points. And then who knows what you get from Quinn, Krebs, Kulich, and Benson, but any of those guys jumping from the mid 20s to the high 30s, low 40s is a lot to ask. And when your power play isn't as good as it's been, right, and your primary thing here has been goals overall, that's a big ask for this team, and it's tough. And I mean, the guy that you can kind of rely on to do that is Tage Thompson, who he's been incredible since he's gotten to Buffalo, right? Like if you anybody talks about this team in terms of development and stuff, Buffalo's development actually hasn't been that bad. They've developed some good players. It's just none of them want to stay. Tage Thompson has been the exception to that in both cases, where he's been unequivocally a great development on both ends of the ice. And he's, locked up enough, right, for Buffalo terms. So this is kind of your horse, but even then, like, if you put Tage Thompson on any of the Final Four teams last year, right, like, is Tage Thompson a better player than Sebastian Aho? Maybe. Is Tage Thompson, even a top 3 player on the Stars last year? Maybe third, right? But, like, I'll take Jason Robertson and Mikko Rantanen over him for sure. Same with Edmonton, right? Like, you're taking Draisaitl and McDavid over him, absolutely. Where does he rank on Florida? Is he the third, fourth best player on the Panthers? And that's kind of my point, right? Like, he's the best player on this team by far, and he's not even what I'd consider a number 1 or number 2 guy that I'd love on a Stanley Cup contender. And that's the problem, right? Like, Tage Thompson's great, and Sabres fans should absolutely love him because I think he's a really solid player, but there's just not enough here for him to be your best player, right? It's not like this team is insanely deep with a ton of guys like near his level. It's Tage Thompson, and that's it. So it's great to have a player like this, but at the same time, like, you need the complementary pieces. You need even another star that can elevate him. And we know that Buffalo was sniffing around Jason Robertson. That was a name that was kind of getting brought up, and that would have been great, right? Like, that would have kind of filled that need, but unfortunately, as of yet, that hasn't happened yet. I highly doubt Robertson's getting moved at this point, but that's besides the point, right? Like, that's all conjecture and speculation. This is kind of the reality this team lives in, and I think Tage Thompson's a great player. This is nothing against Tage Thompson, but if he's the best player on your team and that's kind of what you're hanging your hat on, that's not great. I don't think that's good enough to get you into the playoffs. Like, really, like, unless you get crazy development from everybody else, it's gonna be tough offensively. I mean, one of the guys that's been really important to this team, though, has been Alex Tuck. And Tuck has been insanely underrated since he came from Vegas. And he wasn't really supposed to be, like, the big piece in the Jack Eichel trade, right? Like, it was supposed to be Peyton Krebs, and that just, we all know what Peyton Krebs has kind of become in his couple of years in Buffalo. But Alex Tuck has been a really, really welcome surprise. Now, he's not Jack Eichel, but he's been good in the role that they've given him, right? Like, he's a very, very solid second-line player who has pretty good, play-driving metrics, especially for a winger. And his defense is solid enough, right? Like, his defense isn't going to blow you away, but it's fine, right? The issue is that, we're talking about a guy here who's 29 last year. He's going into his 30s. How much runway is left for Alex Tuck, realistically, right? Until this team is truly ready to compete, like, year after year for a playoff spot, is Alex Tuck going to be a viable option for this team? And it feels like he's, among the players here that Kevin Adams might be letting wither away, right? Like, we talk a lot about the asset management in Buffalo and just how abysmal it's been. And, obviously Sabres fans don't want to talk about trading pieces out because, they want to win. But, like, how much runway do they have here with Alex Tuck still being a very effective second-line player? And this isn't anything against Alex Tuck. Again, like, I think Alex Tuck's a super useful player, but it's just about the window, right? Like, the window in Buffalo seems to be changing, right? Like, the plan of when this team's supposed to be good continues to shift, and there's really it doesn't seem like there's any sort of direction to how this team is supposed to play and when they're supposed to be good. And Alex Tuck is kind of the embodiment of that. as a player. Now, obviously, his locker room presence and what he does to that team is great, but again, like, you can talk about what he does to the room all you want, and the room in Buffalo is still awful. So, every year there's a player trying to leave. So like it's great that you have a good locker room guy and a super effective player, but it's the same kind of argument we got with Jordan Greenway. It's like, well, he's good in the room. The room's still maybe the worst one in the NHL. So, how much worse could it be if you let him go? So it's just that argument doesn't really hold water for me when you're this dysfunctional as an organization. But that's all to say that I really like Alex Tuch as a player, and I think he's going to be another pretty effective player on this team, and he might be their second best forward again, unless somebody like Zach Benson takes that crown. But I think at the end of the year we're talking about Alex Tuch being like, if Alex Tuch is like the fourth best forward on this team and he didn't have a massive decline, that's a really good sign for Buffalo. And here's the thing, right? Like, continue with Alex Tuch here. You talk about his numbers last year and his goal scoring. He shot 17% last season, right? 5-on-5. And like that is far above where his average should be. His expected finishing was about 7%, which is more aligned with his career. It was still his highest expected finishing percentage of his career, but that's the 17% shooting percentage is bound to regress based on that, right? Like it's not that's not sustainable, especially for a player going into his 30s. It's very unlikely that he's able to repeat a 17% shooting percentage. So his goal totals are probably going to drop, along with JJ Peterka leaving. So that's a ton of points, especially 5-on-5, that you're just kind of leaving on the table that you need to replace. And you don't have to replace them directly, but you have to have some kind of solution to make up for that and expand on that, right? Because Buffalo, even if they make up exactly what they did last year, they were still like the 28th worst team in the league. So that's going to be a theme in this, right? It's like if you're losing pieces or players are going to regress, you have to be able to overcompensate for that the other way. And Buffalo just seems to be kind of hoping that they get a bunch of really good development this year, because you got to think that the leash on Kevin Adams can't be that long at this point. Maybe ownership loves him because he's kind of their yes man. The rumor is that Brendan Shanahan kind of called them up and said that he'd be their director of hockey ops, which, based on Brendan Shanahan's track record, I don't know how I feel about that, but it'd be better than what they're doing now. And management kind of said no, like, we're good. So who knows? But it feels like the overcompensation there just hasn't really happened yet for this team. Josh Norris is another player that I think is really interesting. The injuries have been a pretty major concern for him over his career so far, and relying on him to be your number one line center it's questionable, just based on his availability and health. And his numbers don't look great either, right? Like his goal scoring's there, but in terms of play driving, he really hasn't been super effective, right? He's not a big assist machine. He's not creating a ton of primary assists. His chance assists are pretty low, and his defense is just kind of average. So if this is your number one center and this is the guy that you're kind of banking on to take on that role, it's a big risk, right? Like, you're really hoping for some crazy development for him in terms of being a number one line center, and you're also betting on his health, right? Like, this is a guy who does not play full seasons of hockey, right? Like, everybody is talking about that, and it's like, unless you're hoping Ryan McLeod like jumps up and becomes your number one line center this year, which is possible, but again, like, he looked pretty good last year in a limited role. It's a massive risk for this team, and again, when healthy, Josh Norris is fine. It just, can he be healthy and can he take another step? Because even if he's fully healthy and he plays like he did last year, like, he's not a number one line center, especially on a team that's really trying to compete for a playoff spot. And that's a concern for me, right? Like, I don't see a ton of light at the end of the tunnel there. It's more a guy that they were able to get who could be here for a couple of years, which is different than a lot of guys that they get. And that's kind of the situation Buffalo's in right now, right? Is they kind of just have to take what they can get. Speaking of Ryan McLeod, especially looking at his 3-year sample, his defensive numbers are really good, and if he can get back, his defensive numbers were worse last season, but if he can get back to being like a true like solid two-way center, he's a really good option for the second line, right? Like that's ideally that's your 2C. In a perfect world, it's your 3C, but if he continues to develop and continues to play at least offensively the way he did last year and defensively like he has the last couple years in Edmonton, he could be a good second line center for a team that's rebuilding right now, right? But again, like I don't know how much time this team has to figure that out, right? And similar to Norris, you're just kind of hoping that development continues. Now, I think I like Ryan McLeod. I think he's a solid player, and I expect him to continue to develop. But I don't know what his peak is for this team. And again, like if Ryan McLeod is your best center on the roster, like that's not good, right? Like that might be, arguably, one of the worst first line centers in the league. So I don't know how you can really expect to compete with that if that's your number one option. And he's a fine player. Like none of this is saying that these guys are awful players. It's just like none of them really fit the role that they're being asked to play. They're all they're all punching above their weight class in terms of where they should be expected to play in the lineup. And when you're going through the entire roster like that, it causes issue, right? And we talked about San Jose and Chicago in the last little bit, and those teams had a lot of the same issues. But first of all, those teams haven't been bad for over a decade. And second of all, those teams had guys like Celebrini and Bedard that are already filling in one of the most important positions on the roster. So, I don't know. It's a weird situation. I like Ryan McLeod. I think he's a fine player. He's a good two-way player. If he can kind of hit his peak offensively and his peak defensively at the same time, he's one of the better middle six two-way forwards in the league. I don't know if I'd love him as my first line center. The big conversation here is Jack Quinn and Zach Benson. Now, Jack Quinn's numbers, his underlying numbers, have never been great. He's outscored his projected totals his whole career, so like I'm not as worried about that. Defensively is a bit of a liability, but again, like Buffalo's hasn't put him in any real favorable situations, so I'm not gonna go crazy about that. But Zach Benson's the real player I want to talk about here, because Zach Benson, if you're watching on YouTube, his defensive numbers look unreal. Now he's playing 911 minutes. He was playing in some pretty easier defensive situations, but if he can step up into the top six and he can be, a high-end two-way forward, or even take a step back defensively and improve offensively, that's really going to help this team, right? Like if he can become the driving force of this offense behind Tage Thompson even, that is going to elevate what this team can do from a total perspective. Right now, again, like we need to see it first, and we've seen it in spurts, but we need to see it over the course of an entire season and over the course of a couple seasons. But like the projected outlook for Zach Benson looks really, really good, and ideally he can figure that out. And again, if you followed me for a while, I love Zach Benson, so I'm hoping for the best for him. But defensively, he's already been really, really good in more favorable matchups, but he's handled those matchups extremely well. So the expectation is that his numbers might dip a bit in higher competition. He's going to get that because he's probably going to be playing in the top six pretty much the whole season. I just want to touch on a couple of the depth guys on this team. Jason Zucker is one of them. A player who, again, is going to be 33 going into the season. He's got 2 years left on his deal. The defense isn't there. The offense is fine. He's a solid middle six, play driver kind of player. His finishing's been kind of all over the place. But if he can keep like his play driving and his goal generation or his opportunity generation, I guess, consistent with kind of where it's been the last 3 seasons, especially, he's a good secondary scoring option, right? And that's kind of all you need to expect from him. Is he's going to be a good secondary scoring option. He's not going to do much for you defensively. He's kind of the epitome of what the Buffalo Sabres are, right? Like if there's a player to summarize what the Sabres looked like last year, it's Jason Zucker, right? So, I don't know if that's necessarily where you want to be, but hey, I mean, why not? It was a weird contract that they handed out at the time. I didn't love it. I still don't love it. This team doesn't need room guys. They need hockey players that are going to make the team better on the ice, and Jason Zucker's fine, but I feel like there's bigger people they could have tried to go after. And I get it. Some people don't want to sign in Buffalo. You can still trade for players, right? So it kind of goes back to the whole thing here, where it feels like Kevin Adams just kicking up his feet and being like, well, that guy didn't want to sign here, so I'm just gonna sign Jason Zucker to a bunch of money because he wants to play here. And again, Jason Zucker's fine. Like, his play driving is fine. He scores enough for a middle six forward. His defense is about as unreliable as you expect it to be for a guy who's 32 and was never a super high-end defensive player. But like, he's fine, right? He's fine. I'd be a lot more enthusiastic about Jason Zucker playing on a third line in Florida than I would be playing on a second line in Buffalo. Let's put it that way. And finally, I want to talk about Josh Doan, because Josh Doan is another intriguing piece to the. He was one of the two players they got back for JJ Peterka, and everybody didn't like the trade, and I don't like the trade. I don't think it was very good. But aside from the acquisition cost to get Josh Doan, I think Josh Doan is going to be a pretty useful player for the Buffalo Sabres, right? First of all, his defensive metrics in Utah were really good. He was somebody who, again, small sample size and limited, tough competition faced, but he was able to do pretty good in those situations. And for a team that desperately, desperately needs defense, having guys like Josh Doan on the bottom of your roster can really even out a lot of the lapses that you're going to get from the older players on this team. And hopefully that can kind of spark the other players to kind of have less responsibility, I guess, on his line, and he can kind of take some of that. And if he can be, a similar level defender on this team's, bottom six, whether it's the third or fourth line, however he ended up slotting in, then I think that's a successful season, right? Like, I think you're going to see the Sabres defensive numbers kind of elevated slightly, right? Like, if Zach Benson can come in and be a pretty strong defender, maybe not exactly to the level that he has been in the more limited roles, but he's good enough to kind of elevate that top six. And then, you have guys like, Ryan McLeod coming back to, his Oilers numbers defensively, and you have Josh Norris being, a middle of the pack defender. Then you have Josh Doan kind of in the bottom six lifting up, those guys. You're really going to see like these small increments actually help this team overall defensively. And pair that with the actual blue line, which I think is pretty good. We're going to talk about that in a second. Like, the defensive numbers should be better in Buffalo, right? Like, everything points to the fact this team should be a better defensive team than they were last season. Everything also points to this team being a worse offensive team than they were last season. But, if you can elevate the defense more than you're going to lose on the offense, that's still a net positive, right? Like, no matter how you want to weigh it out, right? Like, if your defense is higher than it was last year compared to the offense being lower than last year, then either way it's a net positive, right? Whether you're scoring more goals or you're allowing fewer goals, it works out at the end to be positive either way. Ideally, you want to be rating both, but this is the situation we're in Buffalo. So I like Josh Doan. I think he's going to be a fun player. Sabres fans should like him. And he's young. Maybe he can develop into more of a middle six kind of guy. I see him probably projecting out to be like a good, like, defensive third liner at this point, but we'll see. He's going to get an opportunity, right? Like, I don't think him pushing up Jason Zucker in the top six is that, I think that it's not a massive hurdle to climb in terms of how much, development he needs. So who knows? I've talked about it a bunch. I want to talk about this blue line. Sabres fans, this is where you're going to, well, hopefully like what I have to say, because the caveat is your team's still not very good, and you're kind of wasting the talent that is Rasmus Dahlin, but we're going to jump into him because I'm going to gush over Rasmus Dahlin for the next, couple minutes. But the rest of his blue line is really good too, right? Like, Owen Power's taking steps every season, despite the fact that maybe the on-ice numbers haven't looked great, but his underlying totals have gotten better. Doing film study on him, you could tell that his game has evolved over the last couple years, which is good. That's what you want to see from a guy who went first overall, right? Bowen Byram's a pretty big question mark for me. I haven't been impressed with what he's done, and they just paid him a bunch of money because why not? It feels like that was kind of a wasted opportunity to move somebody out. Matthias Samuelson's another guy who I'm not super high on, and I think was a missed opportunity to move out. That's kind of the story here with Kevin Adams. Then you have, Connor Timmins, who I'm not really going to touch on that much. Connor Timmins is fine. He's an okay sixth defenseman. I don't care. He's pretty replaceable, but whatever, it's fine. Michael Kesselring is another guy that I really like, and he was kind of the big piece of the J.J. Peterka trade coming back. I think Michael Kesselring, as a third-pair defenseman, was exceptional last year. I'm very intrigued to see what he looks like in a more elevated role because he's going to play in the top six and the top four for this team. But I mean, let's jump into this blue line. Rasmus Dahlin. I'm going to put it this way. I'm not gonna spend too much time on Dahlin because I feel like all I really need to say is this. Like, gun to my head, if I had to tell you who is the third best defenseman in the NHL, it would be very hard for me not to say Rasmus Dahlin. Right? Like, you have Makar and Hughes, however you want to rank them. I have them pretty similar, but some people are it's a pretty big fight in the hockey community. But I will stand on the hill that Rasmus Dahlin is pretty squarely my number 3 on that list. And some people might have number 4. A lot of people still like Adam Fox, who's very good. I'm not Rangers fans. Relax. But for my money, Rasmus Dahlin is number 3 on that list. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that his underlying numbers are phenomenal on both ends of the ice. I think he's the best two-way defenseman in the league. Right? Like, Jacob Slavin fans are going to come at me for that. Jacob Slavin might be a better defender. Rasmus Dahlin's offense is significantly better than Slavin's, and his defense is still arguably one of the best defensive defensemen in the league. Best two-way defenseman in the NHL, pretty easily for me, is Rasmus Dahlin. I have him number 3. I absolutely love him. I think the only thing in his game that's lacking is his special teams ability. Right, he doesn't play pretty much at all on the penalty kill. His power play numbers are okay. That's kind of the knock on him, but I mean, man, like, you talk about a guy who's an elite puck handler, an elite play driver, an elite shot opportunity creator. He's very good without the puck in space. He's able to get himself into open areas on the blue line, especially when you don't really have a ton of room on the blue line as defenseman. He is able to kind of generate some extra opportunities there. And, I mean, defensively, like, this guy, he's very good at shutting down rushes. Extremely good at, making sure that there isn't second chance opportunities in front of the net. He's good at getting the puck out of the zone efficiently. And he's doing all this, by the way, with an extremely subpar roster, right? We're talking about Quinn Hughes and Cale, more specifically Cale Makar at the top of this list. And I mean, Cale Makar was on a team that won a Stanley Cup, and Quinn Hughes' Canucks teams are middling at worst, right? So the fact that Dahlin's putting up these kind of numbers in the situation that he's in, being asked to do what he's being asked to do on both ends of the ice, is extremely impressive. And I'm not going to get into speculation about him potentially not being a Buffalo Sabre long term, but man, if Rasmus Dahlin is on the market and you have an opportunity to go get him as another team that's not the Buffalo Sabres, you move almost anything, right? There's very few assets in the league that I would be willing to not move for Rasmus Dahlin. And that list might be like in single digits. Like, I think he is so valuable, and he's young enough that, like, he could be the staple of your blue line for the next 10 years. Buffalo has such an incredible asset here, and I really, really hope that they can finally put something around him that's going to make him more successful and give him that showcase of, being a top defenseman. And I really think the Olympics are going to do a lot of really good for him. The Four Nations was fine, but, like, the Four Nations, I don't think he got enough games to, like, really showcase what he could do. But I think the Olympics are going to be a great showcase of Rasmus Dahlin being, like, arguably the third best defenseman in the NHL. Speaking of, high drafted defensemen for the Buffalo Sabres, Owen Power is another guy who I think the accumulative analytics don't do justice, because if you look at his micro stats, which are up on the YouTube, go watch YouTube if you're not. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering why does he keep saying if you're not watching this on YouTube, because you can listen to the just audio versions of these on Apple and Spotify. So go check that out. Also at NBA Hockey. So just search NBA Hockey and you can find these. They come out at the same time. So if you're at work, you want to listen to these episodes, you can do that. That's fair. And on Spotify, you have the video too, by the way. So if you don't want to burn your screen time for an hour, you can just turn your screen off and then turn it on whenever I'm talking about a slide that's on the screen. So there you go. Go follow the podcast. Rate the podcast too. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, thank you. You're definitely in the minority. Most people are on YouTube. Go to YouTube. Watch, see the videos, see the stats that I'm talking about. Anyway, that's the end of the plug. Owen Power. Really strong underlying numbers, right? Like his numbers are solid, right? Like his shot assists are very good offensively. Again, on a team that isn't that great. It's hard for defensemen to generate offense. Now, Buffalo's offense contributions last year were actually pretty good, but it's hard for defensemen to be that high in this category, especially when they're not getting a ton of opportunities to generate offense. Even though the Sabres scored a lot, they were spending a lot of time in their defensive zone too. Which Owen Power is pretty good at, right? Like he was one of the best defensemen in the league at retrievals leading to zone exits, which is such a underrated stat for defensemen in their own zone, right? Like that, because retrievals are great, right? And this is kind of a bit of inside baseball here, right? Like puck battles 1 is a stat that people love, but if you're winning a puck battle and you're not able to clear the zone, then like what does it matter, right? So the fact that Owen Power is winning battles and getting the puck out of the zone. Now, his successful retrieval percentage is about middle of the pack in the league. It's slightly over, the halfway point of the NHL. But the fact that when he's winning those battles, the puck is almost guaranteed to leave the zone is more valuable than a defenseman who wins more battles but doesn't clear the zone as often. That's just my opinion, but I think that there's a pretty obvious case for that, right? Because like you win a battle, all you're doing is just like mitigating you're prolonging the time for the other team to get a chance if you're not actually able to get out of your zone. Now, some of that does happen due to the players around you, but again, Owen Power's on a bad team that isn't great at zone exits, and he's still one of the best in the league at it. So, hey, that's got to mean something, right? There is a lot of Owen Power's games that I think is very important. I think his defending the rush ability isn't very good, and hopefully having some support in that will help. Like I think somebody like Josh Stone and especially Michael Kesselring, if Kesselring is his partner for the season, will help with that. And I think that'll kind of cover up that ailment in his game as well, and that should ultimately help him become a more well-rounded defenseman if he's able to do that. So I like Owen Power. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate. His team's not very good. His underlying numbers are pretty good for the situation that he's in. Now, does Owen Power look like he should have been a first overall pick? Probably not, but he's nowhere near a bust. He's a very strong, second pair defenseman. I'd be pretty happy with him as like the third or fourth best defenseman on my team, and that's kind of the role he's supposed to be. Well, I guess he's number 2 on the Sabres, but he's on the second pair. So, Bowen Byram's last guy on kind of that left side, and again, Bowen Byram's offense is fine. He doesn't generate a lot of shots. He's somebody that I'd love to see shoot more because, his goal percentages are pretty high. I just don't think he shoots enough, and I think that is a problem with his game. And if they can kind of figure that out, maybe it's giving him some power play time to kind of get more offense that way and kind of start to generate some that way could help. But I mean the contract's obscene. And at the end of the day, this was an asset that some teams were interested in, and I think you should have sold on him because I don't think the potential is worth the potential risk of him not actually developing, and I don't think his potential is super high now anyway. So I think teams were still really bought into like the Colorado stint that he had, where he was playing like 8 minutes a night, playing on like the most sheltered minutes of all time. People still love that. I would have done whatever I could to maximize that asset instead of paying him what they did, because I don't think there's a very good chance that contract ages particularly well. Matthias Samuelsson, again, I kind of mentioned him earlier. He's just kind of okay at everything, right? Like there's nothing that really jumps out to me. The contract, again, isn't good. This is another player that like weaponizing the asset that you had and kind of knowing, like if the Sabres really thought that Samuelsson was going to be like this special defenseman, then I question their pro scouting staff, especially for players like on their team already. And he's just somebody that they should have maximized the value of when they had the opportunity. And now that he's locked into this contract that probably won't age very well. Again, maybe he can become kind of what Esa Lindell is, because Esa Lindell didn't look great his first couple of years, and I actually kind of saw the same trajectory in terms of like his underlying numbers, maybe not necessarily in terms of play, but we're just kind of like middling at both ththings. Now Esa Lindell has developed into a pretty solid like second pair defenseman. If that's what Samuelsson can do, then he'll be fine. But it's another player that just like it's underwhelming, right? Like you're surrounding these strong young players with guys who really aren't going to help elevate their game, right? Like instead of getting now, I think Michael Kesselring can actually he's kind of the exception to this rule, right? But like you look at who like Rasmus Dahlin's had to play with, and even Owen Power before this season, there really isn't a lot of like them playing with guys who really complement them. It's more them having to lift up players who aren't very good, and Samuelson's another example of that. And if that's kind of your mindset, right? Like look at all the good teams in the NHL. Like very few of them have guys who, like for instance, the Devin Taves trade for Colorado, right? Like Devin Taves was a great player. The analytics community loved Devin Taves when he was in New York, but he like complemented Cale Makar exceptionally well. And they went out and got him, right? Whereas you look at a team like Buffalo or even Detroit, where they have this young player who's really, really good, and they're just like, okay, well, we'll just give you this anchor because you can handle it. And you shouldn't be giving them anchors to handle it. You should be trying to make your team better. And I don't think that the Samuelsson contract necessarily did that for this team. But they did move on from Rasmus Verslainen, so hey, I'll give them credit for that. And finally, Michael Kesselring. I've talked about it a bunch, but his defensive numbers look really good. His offense really isn't there, but again, Owen Power might be able to make up for some of that. So, and again, like Kesselring wasn't really played in very much offensive situations, right? Like you look at the 7 defensemen on Utah who played over 30 games, and Michael Kesselring was 5th in offensive zone starts. So this is a guy who they, really believed in defensively, and he was a third pair defenseman, right? But they didn't give him a ton of, insane defensive, and they didn't kind of shelter him with offensive workload. And I think that's important to note here about Kesselring. Now, again, the Utah blue line was pretty banged up last year, so that's a caveat too. But it might have been, out of circumstance that he was playing, more defensive minutes than they probably would have liked. But he was able to handle it really well, and I think that he can really cover up some of Owen Power's mistakes, and he can even win some of those puck battles that Owen Power isn't winning. And he can help with the rush defense, right? Like his rush defense is a lot better than Powers is, and I think that is an instance where he will be a good complement for that if that's who he's playing with. That's why I play him with. But we'll see what they do. Finally, moving on to the goalies, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and Alex Lyon. Again, doesn't strike a lot of optimism in me, but Alex Lyon is just kind of a guy. He's an okay backup. I'm not going to talk about him very much, but Ukko is the guy I want to focus on because, in 22-23, he wasn't very good. Then in 23-24, he was exceptionally good and had this crazy breakout season. And everybody was like, oh my God, they have Devin Levi, who was really good 2 years ago, and now Ukko's went on this crazy run, and they have this like crazy goalie tandem. And now Devin Levi is probably going to start the season in the AHL, and Ukko had a down year again last year. So maybe the positive spin on it is every other year. Maybe Ukko has some crazy breakout season. We get that again, and that helps Buffalo be somewhat competitive in a really, really competitive Eastern Conference. Or maybe he's just a super inconsistent goalie who's better off playing 25 games, 30 games as your backup. It's going to be hard to see. It's going to be hard to say at this point. He is still, young enough, going into his age 26 season. For a goalie, that's fine, I guess. It's not ideal for like a guy who's going to be your true starter forever. But it's not, goalies age a lot differently than players do. Even if you get like 3-4 years of him being like a really solid starter, that's probably more than most teams get out of, a decent goalie prospect. So for me, this is kind of gonna be the year to. I can't even say that, right? Like if he has a good year this year, there's still like the concern that every other year is bad. But if he just has another bad year this year, then I think it's time to kind of admit that maybe he isn't the future option here, and hopefully Devin Levi can get some more prolonged stints here in the NHL. And finally, the special teams for this team. Again, it's gonna be very much dependent on what the prospects can do here, right? Like it's going to be very much determined by guys like Jack Quinn and Zach Benson and Bowen Byram potentially, Yuri Kulich taking steps up and elevating this power play, which can happen, right? Like all those guys are young enough where they're still developing, and that's a good sign, right? Like it's not a power play that's loaded with guys who are all 29, 30 who aren't going to get any better. There is potential for the special teams unit to get better. Same with the defensive side of it. I think that's kind of the thing you have to hope for at this point if you're the Buffalo Sabres, is that the kids can get developed and you can keep playing at a relatively high level. All right, so joining me now is Brendan and Taylor from Straight Up Sabres. They're the experts on the Buffalo Sabres. You just heard me talk about the team for a bit, so now we're going to get the perspective of some people who have made their living following this team, and whether that's a good or bad thing at this point, I guess this remains to be seen. But I appreciate both of you guys joining us for this little conversation about the Buffalo Sabres.
Absolutely, thanks for having us. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, so I guess we'll get started here. Just to give people an overview of what the expectation should be for the Sabres going into this year. What would you two at least consider to be a successful season for Buffalo, whether that's standings wise, development wise, just seeing growth, continuity, whatever. You can kind of take the question wherever you want, but what would be successful?
I think that success this season is defined by one thing, and that is breaking the longest playoff drought in NHL history. It has just been a struggle for the past 14 years. And so really, we've been through so many cycles of rebuilds and retools that we're far past the point of, celebrating guys like taking a step or something like that if it doesn't result in them actually breaking the drought and getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the exact same. I don't really think there's any moral victories to be had this year. That basically have to make the playoffs for it to be an acceptable season. And even I wouldn't even really go the other route where it's like, oh, they got to be so bad that they're shamed into changing things, because I don't really feel that they're capable of shame at this point. So I'd really just go, they got to make the playoffs, or else it's a failure of a season.
No moral victories for sure.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So I guess following that up, if this team is going to break through and get into the playoffs, is there anybody in particular that you could see having a big impact in that, or a breakout season on the Sabres?
I would go with Zach Benson, personally, just because I think if they make the playoffs, it's going to require, like, for example, they'll need to be better at goal prevention, obviously. But that could just be like, if UPL is pretty good and Alex Lyon's pretty good, neither of those are really breakouts. UPL already had his breakout season. So, and then defense, it's like, oh, Michael Kesselring's good enough next to Owen Power. That's kind of not really a breakout. I think they're going to need to be, someone is going to have to step up and be a top six forward who wasn't last year. Someone needs to, they needed someone anyway, and now they lost JJ Peterka, so they really need it. And I think Benson is the most capable of doing that, given that he already has really good underlying numbers when it comes to his underlying defensive numbers. Just in general, when he's on the ice, things are good. He hasn't been a finisher yet. He hasn't been an elite setup guy either. He's only been 18 and 19 these first 2 years, so that makes sense. So what would really be good is finally does those two things well, in addition to everything else. And, he shines on the eye test, so I think a lot of people are pretty excited about him. His ability to forecheck and back check, be tougher than anyone, even though he's been like a 5'9" teenager this whole time. So I think he's someone that, if they were really good this year, I think he would be the best breakout candidate. Brendan, is there another guy you're thinking of?
Yeah, I first and foremost totally agree on Benson and it really being like a pivotal year for him this year, especially really in terms of like point production, I think is the big thing. Like his on ice play has been great, like Taylor said with the eye test and everything. But yeah, it's really just comes down to him getting on the score sheet more. I have a few other guys that come to mind as we're talking about filling the JJ Peterka void and the 68 points that they lost in trading him. I think Jack Quinn is another guy that comes to mind that he needs to find his game if they're going to have any chance of being, having a shot at the playoffs at all. So his rookie year in 22-23, there was some real bright spots where we were starting to feel like, this is a guy that can really turn into like a foundational piece. I mean, he just had these moments of, just seeing his offensive creativity just bursting. And he was starting to develop a little bit of like an aggressive streak in his game too, in terms of just, not only physicality, but in terms of his like thinking and the way that he sees the ice. And he had an injury-plagued season 2 seasons ago where he only played 27 games. And when he came back from that injury, it cost him a lot of his season, obviously. But when he came back, we started to kind of see it a little bit down the stretch. And then last year, I mean, even though he had his career high in points, he was abysmal for the better part of the season. And really a lot of the point heater that he went on towards the end of the year was just that. Like his overall play wasn't really improving. Like he had his moments where, it would be like, oh, okay, like this is the guy that we saw 2 years ago, but it just was not consistent. And more nights than not, he was having a hard time out there, like in all phases of the game. And so if he's able to turn it around and get back to the place where we felt like he was going in his rookie year and be able to take a step in being a scorer, and if he could turn into even like a 50-point guy. I mean, Taylor, I think you would agree most people feeling like him getting his game on track to that degree would be thrilled. And I think that also just speaks to how bad last season was for him. Quickly, then a couple of other guys, maybe an obvious one, but I think Owen Power has a lot to prove this season as well. He has been good throughout the early goings of his career when you consider the environment that he was brought into. I mean, they straight up neglected to get him an actual partner to play with until this year and bringing in Michael Kesselring. Like prior to that, he was tasked with dragging a line mate around on the ice, and he obviously suffered for it. And I think mixed in within that, we know defensemen develop at a slower pace than forwards do. And he had a lot of mental lapses throughout last season that he could make 4, 5, 6, 7, like incredible small plays that don't necessarily show up on the score sheet. But then he makes 2 or 3, like just ugly plays that result, 1 or 2 result in a goal. And that's what people are taking away from his game. And so I think really cleaning up that side of his game and really turning into a high-end defenseman, the kind that he hopefully will turn into being a number 1 overall pick. If he's able to take that step, I think that'll go a long way. And then an obvious one, which Taylor, you can speak to more, I think, is UPL getting it together again and returning to the form that he was in 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that UPL, his career has been kind of a mystery. So he's been really not that good in the AHL. His last year in juniors, he won, I believe, the OHL's award for best goalie, and then got to Rochester and wasn't that good. Came to the NHL, was okay, had some weird times. Then was pretty awesome 2 years ago, and last year he was not awesome at all. I have no idea what to expect from him. So he really could go either way. He's a huge hinge point.
I was gonna say too, like to I think put a cap on. Well, not put a cap on it, but it could take the conversation wherever. I think the reality of it is that it's more than just one guy, and that is a key flaw in what the Sabres were doing with their roster construction this year, and really how Kevin Adams has handled himself as a general manager throughout the 5 years that he's been. And the problem is that they are relying on, it's not even just like internal growth. They're relying on guys to bounce back rather than going out and making their own luck, for a better way of putting it. Like they're relying on Josh Norris, who has never played more than 70 games in the NHL, to be a top 6 center for them. They're relying on Yuri Kulik to potentially be their number 1 center when he hasn't even played a full NHL season yet. Like they're just banking on so many things to happen without going out and kind of creating their own luck and taking control of their destiny a bit more. They're just hoping that things are going to happen. So there's just so many guys that you need something to go right for them to even sniff being a playoff team.
Yeah, that kind of flows pretty well into the next topic actually, and that's the the question I have written down is what's one area of the team that keeps you up at night, but that might not be.
How long do you have?
Yeah. So I guess if you guys want to pick one, I guess the most pressing thing, in your opinion, if there's like one, if you were GM for a day and you were able to address one need on the team, what would you pick?
Well, that kind of reframes it for me because I was going to say ownership, but given that framing, I would say I'd be pretty concerned, honestly, still about the goaltending. I mean, as much as anything, like I would just even looking forward, not just this year. Like UPL's on a 5-year deal. I think this is going to be year 2 of it. Not like super expensive, but it's $5 million a year or thereabouts. And like I just went over, he's been kind of improving. Devin Levi, who had really good numbers in Rochester, incredible numbers in college, hasn't shown it at all in the NHL, and he's still 23, so that's not the end of the world. And then Alex Lyon's like a totally stopgap kind of guy. He's not bad at all, obviously, but it's not really the future. And I think the proof is in the pudding with Kevin Adams because he doesn't always show his cards, and I think he kind of is mostly lying whenever he's speaking to the media. But he drafts a goalie or more every year, and that's something I would do as a GM, I think, because you really never know with goalies. So I would still be worried about goaltending. I guess more so than the forwards or defense generally.
Yeah, I definitely agree that goaltending is a key one. I will say that at least we've seen at some point that UPL can hack it as an NHL starter, and I think Alex Lyon is definitely an upgrade over James Reimer. And this team showed last year that when they get semi-decent goaltending, like when James Reimer stole the job from UPL down the stretch, that they can keep their heads above water. I'll go with the forward group though, and I'll say specifically the top 6. As I mentioned before, I just feel like they're kind of hoping for a lot of things to work out. I mean, it's again banking on Josh Norris staying healthy, and I think there's plenty of questions that you can ask about him being the guy they identified in a Dylan Cousins trade. Yuri Kulik being able to handle a full season's worth of being a top line center, Zach Benson taking the step that he really needs to for them to take a step. And I mean, this is there's so much weight on his shoulders. I think this season, like a lot of people are like kind of thinking like, well, he kind of needs to do this because of the position they're putting him in. Jack Quinn, if he's going to be able to find his game again, like we talked about before, are they going to, put Jason Zucker there for periods of time? And he had a great year last year and was an awesome signing, but is also going to be 34 years old. And I think if there's one thing that this team really needed, it's a dynamic playmaking, either winger or center, but a dynamic playmaking, like X factor type of top 6 forward. And really, because the only one that they have is Tage Thompson right now. I think maybe Benson can turn into that, but Benson is a great 2-way player. But he's not like dynamic in that sense of like being a game changer. He's not there yet, at least. Maybe he gets there. Tuck is just like a rock solid, great top 6 forward, versatile, good in both ends of the ice, but he's not the kind of guy that, like how Tage Thompson in a way can like kind of take over a game when he's on the ice. And a lot of great teams, like you look at, this is a pretty broad generality here, but if you look at any of the Stanley Cup winning teams in the modern NHL and really throughout history, you have to have multiple game-changing forwards. Florida has several of them: Barkov, Reinhart, Kachuk. I mean, obviously Edmonton, them being in the Cup in the 2 straight years, McDavid and Draisaitl. You go to like the Tampa Bay era, when they had their 3 straight cups, Kucherov and Point and Stamkos, like these teams, like you have to have more than one of those guys. And the Sabres only have one of them right now. And Tage is a damn good one, but he can't do it by himself. And so, that's kind of the issue. And I'm even saying like, JJ Peterka was great, but even like a step above him, like I would have loved to see if they would have been able to trade him for, him in a package, like add more to the deal and go and get the best player in a deal. Because they're really missing that. And I think having that kind of guy who's like a true line driver can also help cover up a lot of blemishes too.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the last thing here, just to hopefully end on a positive note for the Sabres fans that are listening. is there a player on this roster that you guys absolutely love or you think is very super underrated that isn't getting a lot of attention from national media that you'd like to shout out and get people to pay attention to for this year?
Ooh, I have one. Taylor, you want to go first? No?
Yeah, I hope I don't take yours.
Go ahead.
I was going to say Owen Power.
Oh, okay. There you go. I was not going to say him, so good.
Oh, okay, good. So Owen Power, I have some of the same qualms that a lot of other people out there have, where I think he needs to be stronger. He needs to be better defensively. He needs to, when he's in front of the net, he can't get pushed around as much. All the things. I don't mean to sound like a 50-year-old man, but eat some steak and do some chin-ups, guy. Like, you're big. You're 6'4" or whatever. Shout out to him, by the way, Owen Power. I think he just got married recently. So
he did.
Good for him. But more to the point, Owen Power has been really good. He was a first overall pick for a reason. And I think when people complain that they don't understand how his results are so different than what they're seeing, I think Brennan explained it well earlier that sometimes his mistakes are a lot louder than the things he does well. There's a bunch of stats out there that are not crazy advanced stats you'd never understand. Just the one from 2 years ago always stood out to me. The Sabres are really bad.
You don't say.
24. I can't. I didn't need to specify there, but obviously they were very bad and they gave up more goals than they scored. In fact, I'm not sure that's true. But as a defenseman, he had a goals for percentage, which is just the percentage of goals that are your teams when you're on the ice. So if you're on the ice for 100 goals and your team outscores the other team 53-47, it's pretty good. And yours is, in that case, would be 53 goals for percentage. Well, his was one of the best in the league, and he was the only defenseman. I believe he was 4th or 5th, but all the defensemen that were near the top there were tied to one of the best forwards in the league. And he wasn't even tied to Tage, who was having a down season that year anyway. I think he took a dip in that regard last year, but another way to put it is plus minus can be very unfair to defensemen, especially ones like Power that play, he's the second power play guy on a really poorly constructed power play, and then also plays some time on the penalty kill as well. I mean, he doesn't get all the penalty kill time, but he does play in the penalty kill sometimes. So he really, also considering he's in a bad team, should have a big, terrible negative plus minus, which also, and the other thing with that is it can be shaky from year to year. But he's played 242 NHL games, and he's plus 8. I'd love to see what his even strength plus minus is. I'm sure it's even better than that. This past year here, Brendan, if I'm not mistaken, he took way more time on the penalty kill with Samuelsson being out.
Yes.
And the penalty kill stunk because their special teams are terrible. And he was a negative 13 this year. I think it was mainly due to that. It's still a plus 8 for his career. I mean, that is, to me, it's kind of surprising given where he's at. I don't think you see a lot of people expect that. I think people think he's so bad at defense, and his offensive numbers don't exactly jump off the screen. You would think, oh, he must be terrible in that regard. Like, let me give you an example. Rasmus Dahlin, who has been a Norris candidate now. He's gotten Norris votes the last 3 years. His career plus minus is negative 58. And again, I don't think it's a fair stat for a defenseman, but I think that shows something with Owen Power that even if he doesn't always look great, the team on the ice looks better with him around. And now, finally, he's seemingly going to have a real partner who can hopefully take on some of that defensive burden. I think that if there's one thing I'm looking forward to seeing, it's that. And it's unfortunate about the fact that I think that they won't be able to score now. But what are you going to do?
I totally agree on Power. That's a great choice, Taylor. I'm going to go with Ryan McLeod for mine. So they end up acquiring McLeod prior to last season, trading Matt Savoy, who was a top 10 pick, pretty highly touted. Traded 1-for-1, and obviously, McLeod coming over from Edmonton at that point, he was a third line center for them who really didn't have much of an offensive pop. Good defensively for sure, but really wasn't doing a ton for you there. But he was also, though, very good in transition. And so Sabres make the move for him to kind of fill that third line center role that I guess you can say more or less, was vacated by Casey Middlestat when they traded him for Bowen Byram. So they bring him in. And I think really the big thing that I know Taylor and I were talking about, and a lot of Sabres fans, people who covered the team, anybody was talking about is with Ryan McLeod, for him to really take a next step, he was going to have to develop an offensive pop in his game and really be able to contribute more offensively. We know he's a great defender in his own zone. Reads the ice very, very well, everything that you want defensively in a third line center. But yeah, he just really didn't have much of the production there. And I mean, he just was everything that they could have hoped for. I would say with a trade like that, moving a guy like Savoy, like a lot of people nationally were ragging on the Sabres for it and saying, what, you traded a top 10 pick for a guy that's a third line center. So at the time of the trade, though, everybody is nationally, I would say, is kind of giving the Sabres a hard time because they're moving a top 10 pick for a guy that is a third line center that really seemingly didn't have any offensive upside. But again, when it came down to it, McLeod just blossomed offensively last year. He played at times in the top six as well when the Sabres were dealing with injuries, namely after they traded Dylan Cousins, and Josh Norris only played 3 games for them down the stretch. He had a good amount of time in the top six and looked like he belonged there. He ended up having a career high last season of 53 points. He scored 20 goals, had 33 assists, and was just a true difference maker when he was out there on the ice. And I would go as far to say that if the Ryan McLeod that the Sabres had this year was on Edmonton this year and they didn't make that trade and he stuck with Edmonton and had this offensive explosion that he had, that the Stanley Cup maybe could have gone differently because he was that good this year. So I think that he's somebody that I'm really excited to see, how he's going to continue to progress. He just signed an extension with them, which was great. Like, good on Kevin Adams for locking him up at I think a pretty good contract. Like, that's one of the few things that you can give him credit for. But yeah, I just cannot sing the praises of Ryan McLeod enough. Like, he defensively was so great. He really made just such a strong impact on this team, really in all 3 phases. Because again, like I said, he also was great in transition, helped with zone entries a lot. So yeah, all around, I just cannot say enough good things about Ryan McLeod.
I agree with that too. Yeah, I really like the trade in hindsight. I was a little worried at the moment, but yeah, there was a lot of overreactions out there that you can still find them because Sabres fans make fun of these guys. I think it's very much not over yet, this trade, but
yeah,
I will say there are some people out there throughout the Forsberg for Erad trade comparison. We gotta save that for
nonsense.
I mean, it's never gonna happen. So you gotta respect that trade. It's never happening again. There'll never be a comparison for that. But in this case, we'll see with Savoy. He had as interesting of a season in the AHL as you could have. Because if he really, first of all, he could have played in the NHL this year, and that wouldn't have been that crazy, and he didn't. And then he didn't really blow the doors off the AHL, but he was good enough that you have to be like, I wonder. But not bad enough where you're like, Jesus, this is a disaster. I don't think he's an NHL guy anymore. He's in an interesting limbo. So this year's going to be big for him.
Yeah. So that's all I got for you guys. Thank you again for joining and talking with us. If there's anything you guys want to plug or let people know where they can find you, I'll give you guys the floor for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us wherever you stream your podcast, wherever you're listening to this episode now. Again, we're called Straight Up Sabres. We're currently wrapping up our 6th season of the podcast. Really excited to head into season 7 next year, and mostly excited to just hopefully at some point while we're still alive get to do this podcast while the Sabres are actually in the playoff hunt, if we could be so lucky. Well, get a playoff spot, I should say. They've been quote unquote in the hunt, but yeah, no, you can find us wherever you stream your podcasts. And then also on social media, we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Straight Up Sabres. I think we're Straight Sabres on Twitter. We post mostly though on, I would say, Twitter and Instagram, a little bit here and there on Blue Sky, not so much on Facebook, but yeah, hopefully whoever's listening, if you're interested in the Sabres and learning more about them, you should check out our show. We put out episodes once a week. So hopefully this isn't the last you'll be hearing from us.
Yeah. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you guys again for joining, and hopefully we'll chat again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
So there we go. 3 episodes in. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching these episodes. I very much appreciate it. If you're liking this series, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram because I'm posting a ton on Instagram as well. Follow me on Twitter, posting a little bit on Twitter. And if you want to listen to the audio versions, as I mentioned in this, Apple, Spotify, they're there as well. So again, thank you so much to Straight Up Sabres for coming on here and talking to us. It was an awesome conversation. They're super nice. Go listen to their podcast too. If you like my stuff, by the way, you will love their stuff because they're very similar in terms of like how they think the game. So go listen to their stuff. And I mean, like, they have to cover the Buffalo Sabres. Like, at least we can do is give them a bunch of followers. The podcast is awesome. So link is in the description to all their stuff. check them out. But again, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and we'll see you for team number 29.